Let me ask you something simple. What makes a mecha anime a mecha anime? Okay, your intelligence feels a little insulted now, right? It's literally called mecha anime, but just hang with me for a sec. After all, a show like Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex has a huge focus on the Tachikoma mechas, yet rarely is it considered a mecha anime. Even more baffling, Bokurano, a show about a bunch of kids who pilot a giant robot to fight alien monsters, is never brought up in the same breath as anime like Mazinger or Raiden, which have near identical premises. Conversely, I've known a great many mecha fans, both in Japan and the West, so enamored with the anime Senki Zesho Symphogear that they granted honorary mecha status. That Symphogear, a show about schoolgirls punching mountains to terrible pop music, is more of a mecha anime than an anime featuring giant robots and alien monsters. These contradictions of fan perception hint at the actual core appeal of what the term mecha anime means to people, in that they're not actually about the mecha. Swap the combining robots and Getter Robo out for swan boats. It's still fundamentally the same anime with the same message, albeit with goose beams rather than Getter rays. Replace Azunyan with a 60-foot robot, K-On does not become Zeta Gundam, although it is substantially improved. It's ironic that although the genre is named after cold, unfeeling robots, the reality is that mecha anime tend to be some of the most personal of them all. Almost always coming-of-age stories about confidence and bravery and the inner journey of the protagonist. That is to say, mecha anime aren't about the robot, they're about the pilot. The mecha are there because they serve as convenient plot devices. You need to give your hero some sort of cool weapon anyways, and giant robots appeal to the same audiences that these monomythic tales of romance and action do, while selling infinitely more toys. It's good marketing.
A solid foundation of sympathetic characters is the most vital aspect of a mecha show.
And that is what Darling in the Franxx fails to understand. The love for mecha is obvious in this Winter 2018 collaboration between Studio Trigger and A1 Pictures. Mechanical design by Shigeto Koyama brings back memories of Die Buster, and mecha mainstay key animators like Akira Amemiya and Hiroyuki Imaishi help drive home that nostalgia with some of the most impressive mecha animation I've seen in decades.
And in the tradition of Star Driver or Aqualion, it's quite literally dripping with sexual tension and character drama.
According to interviews, director Atsushi Nishigori made a personal effort to recruit old friends and collaborators from his time at Gainax
in an attempt to recapture that magic.
So what the hell happened? Franxx knows by heart every setting, visual, and plot beat mecha anime have, and does its damnedest to imitate them. By all superficial qualities, the art style, the designs, the premise, it looks and it feels like a mecha anime from the late 90s or early 2000s. But something's not quite right. The show's hollow inside. It goes through the motions, but the characters lack allure. The story lacks weight, and at the end of each episode I feel apathy covering me like a blanket. Tuck me in. Let me die. Judging by the audience response and the sales, I'm not alone in this. Views, revenue, and just general enthusiasm toward the show have taken a steep nosedive over the past few weeks since the show's premiere. The mecha formula is a great starting point, but when events occur because a writer is trying to follow what a mecha anime should be, rather than have them the natural consequences of character arcs and dramatic need, that's when even the most time-tested plots can just fall apart.
I'm fascinated by the premiere of Franxx. Like the show as a whole, it so cleanly delivers on what I expect from a mecha anime. All my boxes are checked off, and yet it's so terribly unsatisfying.
Today, let's take a look at the first episode of Darling in the Franxx. Let's compare it to the premieres of other mecha anime and look at the archetypal beats that define the genre. In doing so, we can understand how Franxx does everything right and still manages to accomplish absolutely nothing. Nowadays, there's a tremendous burden on the premiere episode. It's common filmmaking wisdom that you either win or lose your audience within the first 15 minutes of a movie. I believe the same applies to anime. Mecha anime like to squeeze the entire first act into the first and second episodes, since doing so allows an episodic show to quickly deliver its premise before jumping into the fun and games. I prefer to think of this first episode in terms of the hero's journey. Campbell describes an archetypal structure used in nearly every human culture that forms the backbone for most stories. You've heard this all before in your high school English class, I'll make it quick. In terms of the opening, or the departure, Campbell divided the first act into 5 distinct phases, all contained within the first episode of a mecha anime. What, don't believe me? Let's take a look at a well-known example. Simon is a digger who lives in an underground village. He likes to dig. He's good at it. He's content digging. Setting up the ordinary world lets you know what your hero cares about, what he values in life, and, were it not for external influence, the kind of person he would be. Kamina, a rebellious teenager, drags Simon along on his escape attempt. Naturally, this fails. A call to adventure introduces the conceit point of the story. Even if the context changes, the fact that Gurren Lagann is about adversity and moving up remains the same. Simon has an inward debate, as he questions whether or not this quest is a good idea. In rejecting the call, the hero humbles himself, strains against the plot and says, "No, I have my own life, leave me alone." As he comes to a decision and steals his heart, he finds something to help him on his quest. Our heroes, eager to set off, have to get past the Threshold Guardian. The Threshold represents what was holding the hero back before, and serves to neatly resolve the mini-arc. Anyways, our characters defeat the bad guy, and they come out the other side, crossing the boundary into the world of adventure. See? Fits like a glove, right? And whether the flavor of the show is a gritty military drama or a sappy love story, this Campbellian formula is so frequent as to be a staple of the mecha genre. I doubt that it's something every anime intends to emulate intentionally, but these story patterns are ingrained in us and go by many names. Now, with that groundwork out of the way, let's finally take a look at the first episode of Franxx.
The first 7 minutes or so are spent setting up the ordinary world, but Franxx starts to stumble right away. The focus is split awkwardly. When we first meet Hero, he's muttering to himself about birds and relationships and finds an injured sparrow. And I know exactly what it's trying to do, but it's too on the nose. A scene should either advance the story or share some relevant information about the characters. What does this monologue show us about Hero? Do these images paint him as an amateur birdwatcher? Does his self-reflection characterize him as a philosopher? Or is the writer awkwardly trying to play the avant-garde angle and use Hero as a mouthpiece for the moral of the story? No one cares about your fancy intellectual themes if they don't care about the characters that are supposed to exemplify them. This is just putting the wagon before the horse. It's unwarranted self-importance. And this is the only time we see Hero in what should be his status quo before his initial meeting with Zero Two. Rather, side characters gossip and there's a bunch of tedious world building. The importance of the ordinary world is that it humanizes the protagonist, makes him sympathetic. It's not just there so you can dump exposition and introduce the side cast of girls you want to sell merchandise of. Luck to Die Buster. First 7 minutes almost entirely spent following the protagonist. By the time the inciting incident occurs, we have a very firm image of who Nono is in our head. She's a country girl. She breaks things. She's sweet, but temperamental, and not above using physical force. She has a clearly defined goal. Nono wants to be a space pilot. If we don't get invested in her character and want to see her succeed, then there's no emotional payoff. No catharsis when she moves beyond her self-doubt and Inazuma kicks the space monster. Your opening scenes are a precious resource. Attention spans are short. Don't waste time introducing characters that won't be relevant until 5 episodes later while neglecting your protagonist, because chances are, audiences won't stick around that long. We proceed to the call to adventure, the inciting incident, the meet cute, whatever you want to call it. An event that radically upsets the balance of forces in our protagonist's life. Our hero was in relative control of his world before, but everything's changed. There's been a Xeon attack on Site 7. Professor Saotome's come back from the dead. A boy with terminal chin cancer meets his long-lost brother. Plot threads are inextricably tied to one another, and here, since we never really established what Hero cares about, we don't get a sense of what impact this encounter with Zero Two had on him. In fact, only now, 11 minutes into the first episode, do we finally get a bit of backstory on the guy, learn he's a pilot and all that. But this gets to my biggest grievance with this episode, and perhaps the entirety of this show. Character is action. A person is behavior, what he does and not what he says. We instinctively know this in real life, that actions speak louder than words. Despite the flood of exposition, when we're told all about Hero's insecurities, does that hit as hard as, say, seeing Shinji desperately vie for his father's affection and failing at it? When people mention that Hero's a skilled pilot, do we understand that fact on the same visceral level as we do when we watch an Itano circus? Look back at the history of anime, the popular characters, the most beloved waifus. Good or bad, funny or edgy, they always have one thing in common. These characters express the kind of people they are via the things they do, because actions speak louder than words. The weight of their personality exerts tidal forces on the motion of the plot. It's not just about how much we get to learn about the character, but the methods by which we get to know our protagonist. Listening to a list of details about someone isn't as interesting as seeing him in action. I think this is the reason that out of every aspect of Franxx, Zero Two is the most universally well received. She's the only one that takes action, who pushes the story along. Yeah, she's just an Anemone clone, but by God, yeah, that's more original than anyone else in this show. Anyways, Hiro rejects the call to adventure, 02's invitation. Confounded by her strange demeanor and enticed by her suggestion, he searches his soul and finds an answer for himself. No wait, he doesn't. Instead, we're introduced to a former partner to lecture Hiro about the things he should already know. This has got to be the single worst scene in the entire episode, by far. The admittedly creative visual composition can't save it. Nothing this girl says has any relevance to the viewer because she's criticizing parts of Hiro we didn't know existed. It's just even more clumsy exposition disguised as drama. At some point, she brings up the fact that Hiro was the one that gave them all names. I was surprised. That would have been a really nice detail to see earlier. It would have anchored Hiro to some form of humanity, choosing your own identity, even in the most oppressive of societies. That's genuine. That's sympathetic. There's this childhood flashback scene in episode 2 where we see Hiro coming up with all these names. Why couldn't it have been used at the start of episode 1? Created a dramatic setup that pays off here. We could have gotten to see this girl rip apart something we knew Hiro cared deeply about. No, let's put in some pretentious bird allegories instead, because Ano did it, right? Instead of Hiro showing some personality by making a decision, by speaking out, or by arguing, he just listens with a sullen look on his face. He falls into this passivity that plagues the entire episode. Sid Fields puts it better than I ever could. Many aspiring and inexperienced screenwriters seem to have things happen to their characters, and as a result, the characters are always reacting to their situations, rather than acting in terms of dramatic need. When this happens, the main character seems to disappear off the page. The essence of character is action. Your characters must act, not merely react. This needs to be established immediately from page 1, word 1. Now, I'm sure some contrarian will say, you're missing the point. Hiro is supposed to be depressed. He's supposed to be dark and brooding and introspective, just like me. That's his character. I say, no. Lack of character is not the same as a character who's lacking. Look to Martian successor Nadesco's first episode. Very similar setup to Franxx. Our protagonist is a talented pilot who's avoiding his duty for whatever reason. In Nadesco, though, the main character takes initiative. He quite consciously does everything he can to avoid the draft. And there's this scene that serves as the rejection of the call, which is quite similar to Franxx, as it features the main character having a conversation about being a pilot. But this one is a debate over the conflict between what you believe and your responsibility to the people. Not only is that conversation thought-provoking, it shows that Akito's character isn't just a set of descriptions, it's expressed via his action. But enough talking about much superior shows, back to Franxx. We come to the threshold. Nishigori knows you've got to end the episode with an exciting battle, and boy does he deliver here. It is as meaningless as it is gorgeous though. Nothing got resolved. Nothing was introduced to be resolved. Getting into the robot is a bid for survival. There's a little speech Hiro gives about how doing nothing is the same as being dead, but come on, the building is collapsing. What other choice does he have? With no proper buildup or escalation, when there's no real choice in the matter to demonstrate a personality shift, then there's no payoff, and the scene, and the entire episode, falls flat on its face. Ultimately, the hero's journey is not an engaging protagonist, a powerful motive, or a central theme, but a set of tools with which you can shape those things. It's no shortcut to quality if creators don't understand what makes a story like this compelling in the first place, when they don't seem to understand their own characters. Franxx strikes me as misguided, or perhaps even arrogant. Nishigori has never written an anime before, so why is he all of a sudden handling series composition and writing scripts for individual episodes? Episode 1 was entirely by him, and the amateur mistakes he keeps making show just how inexperienced the guy is. Later episodes of Franxx, especially those where Nishigori isn't writing, are much better. Hiro in episode 2, penned by Naotaka Hayashi, seems to have taken a 180 off screen, and now he's all fired up. But this first episode exemplifies the structural problems that plague the rest of the show. The passive character writing, the clumsy exposition, and the bloated cast of characters. Despite its best attempts, ultimately, high adrenaline mecha fights and catty relationship drama are no substitute for careful characterization. The sex and the drama and the friction that pervades the series carry little emotional weight if these characters are unrecognizable beyond their stereotypes. There's the fat one, there's the anal one, there's the cocky one, and there's the horny one. What do they care about? What made them the way they are? Why do they like each other? I don't begrudge anyone for liking Franxx. Hell, I'm still watching, so that shows that it has some entertainment value, I guess. But I suspect people are watching Franxx more for the experience of discussing an original sci-fi anime on internet forums with lots of crazy plot twists and cool animation and the potential for waifu wars than because they genuinely feel a connection to the characters or the story. I've seen this kind of fad before, more times than I can count. Code Geass, Guilty Crown, Psychopaths, Aonoa Zero, Valve Rave, Captain Earth, list goes on and on. It's almost a bi-yearly tradition at this point that there will be a flavor of the week big budget train wreck everyone watches and overreacts to, but they're forgotten in the span of months, if not weeks. Yeah, everyone's talking about episode 14 and 15 of Franxx and the crazy NTR drama and all that,
And episode 17 and all that sex crap.
but remember the Valve Rave rape scene? The Guilty Crown 1488 stuff?
Remember when people were going crazy and treating those shows like they were gonna be the most amazing things ever? Like there was some GOAT anime that were always gonna be relevant?
This sort of telenovela twist is just shock value to keep you interested for the next few weeks. But when was the last time you heard someone talk about Guilty Crown? Decades since, Cheryl Gnome is still selling out concerts in Japan. First Gundam is still getting remakes and continuations. People I know still quote the likes of Rumba Rao or Basara Neki or Ryoma Nagare or Kamina. 10 years from now, Franxx will only be a footnote in Trigger's career, a failed attempt to copy something much more successful, like soy milk or almond butter. Explains the fanbase. The real takeaway here is that the soul of a story is not found in its superficial elements, not in how cool the robots look, not in how sexy the design,
Not in what shocking and explicit developments occur.
it's in how much your audience cares about your characters, how much they see themselves in your heroes. That's what's touching. That's what stays with people long after they've seen the show. Because mecha anime aren't about the robot. They're about the pilot,